The gradual strengthening of the Roman Republic, initiated by shrewd reforms and military victories, wasn't without its internal strife. The burgeoning wealth and influence of the patrician class fueled new conflicts. Various plebeian and patrician factions vied for power, tearing society apart. External expansion, bringing riches and new lands, simultaneously fed the ambitions of military commanders, who increasingly used their popularity to undermine the existing system. Gaius Julius Caesar, a brilliantly talented strategist and orator, managed to exploit these divisions to achieve his own ends. He skillfully manipulated the Senate, won the love of the plebeians with his charisma and generous land distributions, gradually accumulating all the levers of power in his hands. His Gallic campaigns, though protracted and exhausting, secured him unprecedented fame and military might. Caesar's return to Rome marked a turning point. His loyal and seasoned army became the guarantor of his power. The Senate, fearing his ambitions, attempted to weaken him, but Caesar proved more cunning. He displayed unparalleled political flexibility, deftly maneuvering between factions, making concessions, and using his supporters to neutralize opponents. The gradual but relentless concentration of power in his hands signaled the growth of his influence and the inevitability of change. The assassination of Caesar, perpetrated by a group of senators hoping to restore the republican system, proved a catastrophic error. His death ignited a wave of popular fury and acted as a catalyst for the eruption of protracted civil wars. Octavian, Caesar's nephew and adopted son, leveraging his adoptive father's name and legacy, brought the renowned general Mark Antony and Lepidus into his cause, forming the Second Triumvirate. Over the following years, they dealt with Caesar's assassins, consolidating their power and controlling the empire. But their alliance proved short-lived. Ambition and disagreements led to a new schism, a new turn in the civil war. The Battle of Actium became the culmination of this conflict. Octavian triumphed over Mark Antony and Cleopatra, securing final victory. Afterward, he became the undisputed ruler of Rome. Despite outwardly paying homage to republican traditions, Octavian concentrated all power in his hands, creating a new form of government, the Principate. He adopted the title Augustus, gradually strengthening his power and laying the foundation for the long era of the Roman Empire. The Republic, which had existed for centuries, vanished into history, giving way to the Empire. Its history was still full of events, victories, and conquering campaigns, but its origins lay in those turbulent years of struggle for power, in the bloodshed of civil wars, and in the ingenious manipulations of figures like Gaius Julius Caesar and Octavian Augustus. The dawn of a new era was paved with blood and ambition, yet it laid the groundwork for one of the greatest empires in world history. The conquest of Rome didn't stop with the overthrow of the Etruscan kings. The republic that arose from their ruins was rife with internal contradictions, but paradoxically, these became the driving force of its expansion. The patricians, the ancient nobility, held power in their hands, relying on the legions, a well-trained and disciplined army that craved spoils and glory. The plebeians, the common people, constantly demanded greater rights, leading to protracted social conflicts, but also to the development of a political system that, though imperfect, allowed for a relatively peaceful resolution of these disputes. These internal disagreements compelled Rome to seek external enemies to divert attention from its internal problems. The Latins, ancient tribes inhabiting the territory around Rome, were the first. They were conquered but not destroyed. Rome offered the Latins limited Roman citizenship, thereby securing their loyalty and additional resources. This was a clever strategy that later became the cornerstone of Roman expansion, conquest followed by the gradual integration of the conquered. Next came the Samnites, a warlike tribe from the Apennine Mountains. Their wars with Rome were long and bloody, but the Romans, perfecting their military machine and employing tactical flexibility, emerged victorious. The Samnites, like the Latins before them, were gradually integrated into the Roman state. This process lasted for decades, accompanied by uprisings and new military campaigns, but each victory increased the area of Roman possessions and its population. Expansion southward brought Rome into conflict with the Greek colonies in southern Italy. The Greeks, though possessing a superior culture, were disunited, which proved their weakness. Rome gradually conquered the Greek cities, enjoying their wealth and cultural heritage, but in turn transforming them into its provinces. This revealed a deeper aspect of Roman policy, the ability not only to conquer but also to adapt the cultural achievements of the conquered, incorporating them into its system.
Gradually, Rome dominated the entire Apennine Peninsula.
But Roman ambitions extended beyond Italy. At the beginning of the 3rd century BC, a period of Roman wars of conquest outside the peninsula began. The start of expansion eastward was driven by several factors: political instability in the Mediterranean, the wealth of eastern states, and the Romans' desire to control important trade routes. The conquest of Sicily, after prolonged wars with Carthage, marked the beginning of a long path to world domination. Carthage, a powerful maritime power, became Rome's main rival, and the protracted Punic Wars ensued, determining the fate of the entire Mediterranean. Victory over Carthage opened up new lands and immense riches for Rome. The Roman Republic, thanks to its military might and adaptability, firmly embarked on the path of building its empire, which for many centuries determined the fate of a large part of the world.
Augustus's consolidation of power didn't mean tranquility.
Italy, newly unified under the Principate, required reforms, and the provinces needed stability. Of course, the legions, loyal to the emperor, successfully suppressed rebellions and uprisings, but external threats remained. In the east, Parthia, a powerful empire, constantly provoked conflicts, attempting to regain lost territories. On the Rhine and Danube frontiers, barbarian tribes, Germans, Celts, Dacians, constantly raided, seeking to enrich themselves at the expense of the wealthy Roman provinces. Therefore, Augustus, despite his desire for peace, was forced to constantly maintain a large army, build defensive structures, the limes, and conduct military campaigns. This was a challenging task. The Roman army, which reached the peak of its power during Caesar's time, required reorganization. Augustus carefully reviewed the system of recruitment, supply, and army management. He created a professional army whose soldiers served under contract and received regular pay, significantly increasing their loyalty and combat effectiveness. Military tactics and strategy were improved, and new types of weapons were introduced. Legions stationed throughout the empire became not only a military force but also an important factor in maintaining order and stability in the provinces. They built roads, bridges, and fortifications, and after completing their service, many veterans received land grants, becoming pillars of Roman authority locally.
Augustus's domestic policy was also aimed at strengthening the empire.
He understood that economic stability was key to Rome's prosperity. Reforms of the tax system simplified tax collection and reduced corruption.
Trade flourished, with goods flowing along new routes from all corners of the empire, enriching Rome and its provinces. Augustus also paid attention to the social sphere.
He created social security programs for the poor and unemployed, supported the construction of new buildings, temples, and aqueducts, improving the quality of life for city dwellers and strengthening the image of the government. Over time, Rome transformed into a magnificent city, a center of civilization, where different cultures and traditions intertwined. Greek culture, which had a significant influence on Rome even before the founding of the empire, continued to develop, enriching Roman civilization with its philosophy, art, and literature. The voices of different peoples echoed in the streets of Rome. Its temples were dedicated to both Roman gods and those of the Greek pantheon. Roman architecture impressed with its grandeur and beauty, colosseums, forums, thermae, aqueducts, all testified to the empire's wealth and power.
But Augustus's success, despite outward splendor, was based on a delicate balance between power and political cunning.
He skillfully manipulated the Senate, using it as an instrument of his power while maintaining the appearance of republican traditions. His reign became a long period of peace and prosperity, allowing the Roman Empire to strengthen and expand its influence on neighboring territories. This was the time when the foundations were laid for the long existence of the mighty Roman Empire, a period that would later become its golden age. But history is rarely calm, and new threats and challenges already loomed on the horizon for Augustus's successors. With the fall of the last Etruscan king, Tarquinius Superbus, Rome found itself at a crossroads. The republican system, though not yet fully ordered, had already sown the seeds of freedom in the hearts of the Romans. But this freedom was fragile, constantly threatened by both internal strife and external enemies. The Sabines, Latins, Etruscans, all awaited Rome's weakness to deliver a devastating blow. The early years of the Republic were a time of continuous wars and political instability.
The patricians, the old aristocracy, fought to preserve their privileges, while the plebeians, ordinary citizens, demanded equality and protection from the arbitrariness of the nobility.
This struggle, which divided Rome into two warring factions, was often more dangerous than attacks from external enemies. However, it was this struggle, this tense atmosphere, that forged the character of the Romans. They learned to unite in the face of danger, to develop strategies and tactics that made their army invincible. The legions, initially composed of poorly armed peasants, gradually transformed into a well-organized military machine capable of long campaigns and lightning-fast attacks. Servius Tullius's military reform played a significant role, establishing a new recruitment system that took into account the citizens' property status. The army ceased to be merely a militia, becoming a professional force loyal not to individual leaders but to the Republic. The expansion of Roman territory became inevitable. Every victory, every new settlement captured, strengthened Roman power and increased its resources. The Latins, initially enemies, gradually became allies, joining Rome in its wars and receiving certain rights. The Etruscans, despite resistance, were gradually subdued, and their cities and lands became part of the Roman state. The Sabines, another neighboring people, also suffered defeat. The gradual subjugation of neighboring tribes was not only the result of military superiority but also of Rome's effective policy, which offered allies certain advantages and rights, strengthening its position through diplomatic means.
However, not all was smooth.
Internal political struggle continued, threatening stability.
The conflict between patricians and plebeians led to social upheavals and political crises.
The plebeians finally achieved the creation of their own representation in the Senate, the tribune of the plebs. Tribunes had the right of veto, allowing them to protect the interests of the common people and restrain the arbitrariness of the patricians. This was an important step towards creating a more just society. Gradually, through compromises and concessions, Rome approached a more stable and just system where the interests of all citizens, at least partially, were considered. But this was a long and difficult process, accompanied by numerous internal conflicts, rebellions, and coups. Despite everything, Rome grew rapidly, its influence spreading further, laying the foundation for the future empire. Every war, every victory, every internal conflict forged its might and determined its path to dominance in the Mediterranean.
After Julius Caesar's death, Rome plunged into the maelstrom of brutal civil wars.
Octavian, Caesar's adopted nephew, rallied the legions under his banners, seeking revenge for his guardian's death and the acquisition of power. Mark Antony, a brilliant general and loyal friend of Caesar, was initially Octavian's ally, but their alliance proved fragile, undermined by ambition and mistrust. Another powerful player, Lepidus, a former triumvirate, tried to balance between the two, but was ultimately removed from power.
The Battle of Actium in 31 BC was a turning point.
Octavian's fleet crushed the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, whose fatal alliance proved disastrous for the ambitious Roman.
Antony and Cleopatra perished, leaving Octavian without serious rivals in the struggle for power over Rome.
The victory at Actium not only ended the civil wars but also marked the end of the Roman Republic. The era of republican ideals, with its senate, popular assemblies, and praetors, gave way to a new order, the Principate.
Octavian, a shrewd and cunning politician, was in no hurry to declare himself emperor.
He understood that openly seizing power would provoke resistance from republicans and the people, who still remembered freedom. Therefore, he chose a different path, the gradual concentration of all levers of power in his hands, using cunning and diplomacy. He gained popularity among the people by being a successful general and initiating large-scale reforms aimed at improving the lives of ordinary Romans. Octavian developed infrastructure, provided jobs for the unemployed, and distributed bread to the poor, populist measures that significantly strengthened his position. The Senate, gradually losing its power, increasingly simply approved Octavian's decisions. He held numerous honorary positions and received more and more powers. In 27 BC, Octavian adopted the title Augustus, sacred, majestic, which symbolically concluded the transition to the new political system. He formally remained the first citizen of Rome, but his power was limitless. He controlled the army, the state apparatus, and finances, and effectively governed all spheres of life in the empire. An era of peace and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, ensued, lasting nearly 2 centuries. Thanks to Augustus's reforms, the Roman Empire experienced a period of economic growth. Trade flourished, and there was active construction of cities and roads. New territories joined the empire, expanding its borders. Augustus ensured the strengthening of the army and navy, creating an effective system of management and border protection. He also introduced reforms in the legal system, improving its fairness and efficiency. Augustus diligently cultivated his cult as emperor, encouraging the veneration of his person. He strengthened his power and created a strong foundation for future generations of rulers. He understood that strong power requires not only force but also legitimacy. Therefore, Augustus successfully manipulated the symbols of the Republic, demonstrating respect for traditions but gradually reinterpreting them. He actively supported culture and art, being a patron to many talented people of his time. As a result, he created the image of a wise and just ruler who cared for the well-being of his subjects. This contributed to the consolidation of society under his rule and helped create a strong foundation for the long-term prosperity of the Roman Empire. The beginning of his reign marked the transition from the chaos of civil wars to an era of relative peace and stability, which formed the basis of the Roman Empire's greatness. But history rarely remains tranquil, and new threats and challenges awaited Augustus's successors on the horizon.